I've been here since 2010, so I'm really excited to finally be done with this chapter and start my new one. So the topic of my capstone is the need of psychosocial support for people diagnosed with a chronic disease. What sparked my interest was why people who are diagnosed with this disease and illness need support. This linked to several other questions like what exactly is a chronic illness, how people react to chronic illness diagnosis, and what type of psychosocial support can be given. I found that psychology plays a key role in the way people cope with illness and that they rely heavily on the support of others. So why did I choose this topic? So my mother was diagnosed with end-stage renal failure, and a really close friend of mine has cancer, and he's currently going through chemo, and my mom is on dialysis. So I've seen both of their lives completely change and go from 100 to 0 within these last 5 years. And with seeing that, especially with seeing how my mom went from being a full-time worker and she would go to school, now she just needs to be watched over every second of the day within the last 5 years. So why did I choose this topic? The fact that psychology has a significant role in the way people cope with a significant loss of autonomy makes for a great, interesting field of research, mainly because it opens so many questions about the support one gets from various sources, something I set myself to explore. Secondly, I wanted to understand how patients react, where do they turn to, especially if they don't have a family, and what is the role of healthcare professionals in the entire process. From breaking the bad news to coming to terms with the condition. Finally, I wanted to explore all possible outlets of psychosocial support for patients with chronic disease, because I believe this is a very unexplored issue. So the types of psychosocial support I found were support from friends and family, spiritual support, support from the physicians and the healthcare givers, and group support. Okay. So the psychological well-being of patients suffering from chronic illnesses does not differ greatly across specific illness groups. A patient suffering from chronic diabetes will react similarly as one suffering from chronic heart condition. However, there are some chronic conditions such as cancer or chronic kidney disease that require a very specific approach by the healthcare professionals. For example, like I mentioned, for my mom, that she's on dialysis, she's end stage of renal failure. She has to go to dialysis. So I went to her. She gets dialysis from DaVita. And I spoke to her social worker, and I was like, hey, is there any program that DaVita implements, or is there anyone I can reach out that can provide some psychological support, because I noticed that my mom became very anxious and depressed because of this disease. And the social worker, she pretty much told me that I needed to find a therapist through my insurance rather than them having a program or something. So that really bothered me, and that's what motivated me even more to do my research on this. So next I'm going to be showing you the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. And this, like I mentioned, it doesn't matter what kind of illness you have, you're gonna pretty much be going through the same some of these feelings. So let's see. The most common phases in the aftermath of a chronic diagnosis are negation. The first emotional response would be anger, and a negative emotional response where patients idealize what they've lost. Then you have negotiation, where the patients try to compensate the loss. after you have depression or sadness, depends on the psychological state of the patient. And lastly, you have acceptance, where the patient accepts the reality of the situation. Like I mentioned, it's important to note that these stages are different for every patient. Some patients go through all of them, some go through one or two, and others linger on different phases. Okay, so how did I go about this? The initial question brought me to a number of sources that were roughly in the same fields of interest. I slowly pieced together a story about chronic illness and what it is and how it affects people. Once I knew exactly what course I wanted to go follow, I started to develop questions about psychosocial support that led me to initial sources that were linked directly to the subject. I asked myself, how do people cope with a significant loss? What's the role of the family, of religion, of the healthcare professionals? The key terms I used in my searches were psychosocial support, psychology of chronic illnesses, psychology of terminal prognosis, and psychology of disease. I later managed to refine the search terms because my initial question expanded so much. I started to research key terms together like religion and terminal illness, implications of terminal prognosis on healthcare workers, and psychosocial support of terminal patients. And lastly, the role of family in terminal patients. So the search, I conducted my research using the university database, various online databases such as ProQuest, PsycArticles, and our academic search Premier. So the biggest obstacles I encountered were, actually bringing everything together and starting to write my paper. Mainly because of how much information I got, and I just didn't know what information I could bring or what information I should put into my paper that will give you the same point of view and make you question the same things that I was questioning. So I reconfigured my initial design and purposed several times, and the emergence of new areas inquired, such as when I first started, I didn't see the importance of religion. Even though now that I finished this research, I noticed how my mom went from being not religious to being super religious now. She goes to church every Sunday, and she just joined prayer groups, and I realized that that's how she's learned to cope, that's how she's found her way of hope, and how she can continue to live her life, and something that'll motivate her to get better. So after trying to enclose all of these into my paper, I realized that I couldn't fit everything in here, obviously. So I chose to focus on the aspects I found closest to home. So let's see. So those are my findings, prognosis, how the caregivers and physicians deliver the news, coping with the prognosis, involving others, and then how that ties in with psychosocial support. So I'm going to go into pretty much the types of social support and their effectiveness on the well-being of people with chronic illnesses. So the first one that I found was friends and family. The importance of friends and family, their support involves more than just encouraging words. It involves offering a listening ear to the individual, so it allows them to vent out their frustrations. Patients who are highly supported by their families often have a lower mortality rate as opposed to those with no family support. A study conducted on patients diagnosed with breast cancer showed that remission levels for patients were higher in patients whose families were present and involved in the chemotherapy sessions, as well as their doctor's appointments. And I can vouch for that because when my mom first started dialysis, it was just my dad going with her, and 5 years later, it's me, my grandma, my brother, my uncles, like we're all just there and supportive of her, and she's just doing so much better overall. Like she decided to want to actually join what's that list? The donor list. She wasn't for it at the beginning. She's like, no, like I'm gonna just do dialysis up until I have to go. And I was like, well, what kind of thinking is that? So I've noticed that since me and my family got more involved, she decided to join the donor list, and things have been looking upward for her. So another form of support would be spiritual. So spirituality has been found to be a leading coping mechanism for individuals with chronic illnesses. Individuals with chronic illnesses often turn to spirituality in order to fully understand the dynamics of their illnesses and to find hope in which to ground their health. Individuals with chronic illnesses often turn to spirituality. Sorry, I just read that. It makes them see life in a sacred kind of way, reducing the chances of suicide-related cases, as well as encourages them to live each day with realism regardless of the limitations that their disease put them through. Spirituality initiates an individual into a life full of optimism and consequently contributes to their well-being. The third type of emotional support would be part of the physicians and healthcare givers. The physician and healthcare givers, such as nurses, counselors, psychologists, primaries, play a key role in the administration of psychological support. This is because they are ever present in the role of they're always there with them, like at the hospital, their doctor visits. That my mom's in dialysis, like she always has her primary there, so the doctor's always there, and they're the ones who also who initially assess the health situation, as well as they're the ones who administer the medical treatment to the patients. So for example, if a person who is terminally ill gets the impression that his healthcare is a burden to the healthcare workers, they might not be as receptive to the treatment that they need to get, which oftentimes, they can't get better. So there are three main attributes that make the healthcare service providers effective when dealing with chronically diagnosed patients. These are compassion, cheerfulness, and consistency. Compassion improves the receptivity of the terminally ill patients to treatment, leading to better well-being. It is also important for the physician to consider good relations with the family of the patient, so as to enhance monitoring of the patient when they are at home. The second one is cheerfulness. Cheerfulness reduces the possibility of depression-related symptoms. Patients have reported to relate better when doctors who approach them with a positive demeanor. It makes them feel that their case is not as severe, or consistently enhancing trust between the healthcare givers and the patients, making the treatment process smoother. And consistency just talks about not changing doctors frequently, and just making sure that your primary and your neurologist and your nephrologist and all your doctors just stay with you throughout the whole process. And lastly, the last support would be group support. So group support. Individuals who suffer from chronic illnesses can benefit from group support by discussing their progress, sharing information about specific conditions and methods of treatment, and personal experience during treatment. This is an effective method of psychosocial support because it reduces the chances of isolation and loneliness for people with these illnesses. Sorry, I was supposed to be changing the slides. Okay. So what questions remain? I found that these questions that I still have questions, and I didn't get to answer them, but some of them would be new ways to support these terminally or chronic diseased patients. Also, the increasing role of family, and I would want to go greater in depth with this defining spirituality. So this paper discussed several approaches to psychosocial support for patients, mainly through peer support, support groups, family support, healthcare provider support, and spirituality. Psychological support is important because it increases recovery levels of patients, it decreases their mortality rates, as well as increases their overall sense of self-worth, well-being, and quality of life. Although most patients eventually learn to cope with their condition, there are some instances in which the patient develops severe psychological trauma, most commonly in the form of depression or anxiety. To counter this possibility, it is important to offer psychosocial support to the patients. It is important for psychosocial support to be incorporated with medical treatment because it affects attitudes, which make the patients more receptive to treatment. And in addition to the stress caused by this chronic illness, a lot of patients, if they don't get this psychosocial support, a lot of them decide to ignore or refuse any kind of treatment. Like I noticed when my mom was first doing dialysis, she would opt to not, she's supposed to go Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. She would just be like, oh, I'm gonna just go Tuesday and maybe I'll go Saturday. And it's like, no, you have to like do it consistently, you have to do it every day for you to wanna get better. So that concludes my capstone project. Any questions?
I have a few questions, and the first one, did anything sort of jump out at you and surprise you in your research?
Yeah, well, how I mentioned earlier, I didn't realize, like, I'm not a spiritual person. I mean, by default, because my parents and my family are Catholic, you know, I say I'm Catholic, but I don't necessarily follow it. That was just my upbringing, so I didn't realize how important spirituality really is when dealing with any kind of loss, or when you pretty much have loss of hope. Spirituality comes in and reaffirms that everything's going to be okay. Like there's a bigger reason for why things are happening. So I think overall spirituality was the biggest like eye opener for me.
And my other question was actually related to that. Whether the spirituality aspect encourages people to think I'm going to get better, or do you think it's more a question of accepting that this is the way it is?
It's accepting, and I think it's accepting. It's not thinking like, oh, you know, God is going to make me better, or a miracle is going to happen. I think it's definitely accepting and coming to terms with it. Yes.
You know, one thing is I personally have had experience with a couple of aspects of this, of a spiritual leader providing help with someone and being with a family. And one thing I think I'd be interested if you found this out, that spiritual support, I think also lends to or leads into family support, where the family gets stronger and can lend support to that the patient also. I mean, I think some of these things are very interconnected.
Yeah,
and
they go hand in hand.
that the spiritual part especially leads into not just for the patient but for the whole family. At least that's kind of my experience in seeing that too.
Yeah, I've seen changes in well, with my dad, like I said, they weren't like devout Catholic followers, but my dad will go to mass with my mom, and if he's not working, like, you know, he'll do the prayer group with her, and I have seen it change some dynamics in my family. Any other questions?
I did have another question, but I can't think of it.
It's okay.
Someone else think of something. What was my question? Yeah, it'll come to me later.
You can email me.
I'll email you.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
My name is Aisha Riley, and I will be talking about the psychological impacts of social media. So, why I chose this topic? I chose this topic to better explain how psychology affects more people around the world. For myself, I do have a social media, and so I didn't really think that the psychological disorders of social media would affect me because I feel like I'm fine. I feel like I'm not depressed, I don't have any types of anxiety, on the surface at least. But deeper and deeper as I dove into the topic, I found that that's not necessarily the case, which made me understand that that may not be the case for lots of others as well who may think that way. Awareness is very important to take action. If we don't know what's happening, if we don't know how this affects us, then we don't know how to move forward into better the effects of social media. So, with that being said, I want to first talk about the importance of the topic. So, of course, first, global relevancy. This is very important. It affects people all over the world. Social media use, there are about, in the United States alone, 78% of all Americans have one type at least of social media. This is important knowing how marketing works, because although many people think that you go on social media to interact with friends and to network, which is also true, but that's only for one generation or one group or age range of the users on social media. There are also other users. If you've ever seen this before, if you're purchasing something online, then they're kind of making it harder for you not to have a social media. They make it inconveniencing for you to have to sign up or go through all of these steps where you could just push sign in with Facebook or sign in with Twitter. So they're making it more and more convenient for everybody, young people, old people, whether you want to go shopping online. They're making it more convenient for you to have a social media. So that's really important to understand the global aspect of it, and how not only are the ones who have social media who want to network, but we're all affected by it, even if you're not on it for networking purposes. The fact that you have one gets you in the system, and once you're in there, they find ways to keep you interested in Facebook, to keep you interested in Twitter based off of the information that you give out. Okay? So as social media users, will psychological disorders increase as well while we use social media? With marketing companies, many of them target social media users because we buy the most products from being online. I've learned in my research that 75% of people on social media are heavy music spenders. So we buy iTunes, we're buying Apple Music, we're buying Tidal prescriptions, and that's all from us being on social media, us seeing other people who are listening to this music, who are watching these TV shows that make us want to watch these TV shows. So marketing, they want for everyone really to be in social media, because we'll influence each other to buy these products. So it's really a global, it will really impact all of us, globally. Moving on. So my research roadmap, why this is important. This is important because outside of social benefits, social media users can be affected by social media through purchase. I found that from starting this research, there are many psychological effects of social media, and so I had to narrow it down to the most important, because this research would have taken me many years to complete. So I found that social media disorders can range all the way down from eating disorders to insomnia. The most people who are on social media are around times at nighttime, and so that affects our sleeping and our cognitive thinking, which is directly related to our development. And so many times this social media use can lead to high forms of disorders. But the main disorder that I found when researching this topic was that social media use can lead to depression. Depression is increasing in all age groups and in every single community. The growth is seen most in teens. New research found that 75% of all teens own a cell phone. That's 3 in 4 teenagers. It may sound like a lot, and it is a lot, but the importance of it is, why does that matter? This matters because research suggests that a large part of this generation's social and emotional development is happening online, and it's shaping the minds of the youth. And at this large rate of increase, depression will be the second highest disabling condition in the world by 2020, behind heart disease. This is very important because it really makes us look at the future. What does our future look like if 90% of all people are depressed? What does our future look like if these people who are depressed lead to clinical depressions, which means we have to get all kinds of medicines or psychology treatments? How does that look to our future and to the global development? So that's really important when dealing with this, is really talking about the future and how if we continue to use social media, if we continue to be on these sites, then what happens to us psychologically in the future? What does this look like 10 years from now when it's really having a huge weight on us? What happens then when it's kind of too late, I want to say. One of the other psychological effects that I found were the highest in social media use was anxiety. One of the important disorders that I found, and that I found most interesting, was FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. FOMO is the anxiety that an exciting or interesting event may currently be happening elsewhere, often aroused by posts seen on social media websites. So for a real life example, us sitting in this room, not a lot of us are engaged in our cellular devices right now. And so as a result of that, you may start to feel like, what's happening? What am I missing? I just posted a picture 30 minutes ago. Who's liking it? Who's commenting on it? Who's talking about me? And so, this is all things that we're making up in our mind. We're here, we're in present time, but our bodies are here, but our minds are not. Our minds are constantly seeking something else that's happening somewhere else. And that's where that anxiety disorder comes in. You want to be where the so-called action is. So research suggests that research suggests that people who use their cell phones more often experience moderate levels of anxiety. So the longer you're on your cell phones, the moment that you're without it, you get increased anxiety more than someone who doesn't use it as often. So that explains this cycle that I'm showing right here, which is the FOMO, the fear of missing out, leads to social media activity. So I feel anxiety, I can't, so I pick up my cell phone and I look and I say, okay, it's pacified that feeling for now, until I put it down again and I feel like, okay, what's happening now? And I go back to the social media activity, and so it just keeps on happening, it keeps on happening. How do we break this cycle? So I want to specifically go into a research method that I found on how they measure this. How do you know that this anxiety is building in these people and getting lower in these people? How do we know that what we think is happening is happening? Well, they did a research study where they had 175 participants, and they took their cell phones away during the course of the study. The study took 75 minutes long, and they had to record how they feel on a scale: I feel calm, 1 not at all, and 4 very much so. So on that scale, they did it in 25-minute intervals. So the first time they asked you, it's been 25 minutes, you don't have your cell phone, how do you feel? I'm okay, I'm doing good. After that, the next interval, how do you feel? I don't know, maybe somebody called me. What if an emergency is happening? I could have missed a call of my children. What's happening? And so this anxiety starts to build in you at this point. And by the last cycle of this experiment, everybody got anxiety. Okay, so it's all at different levels depending on how often you use your cell phone, but research shows that in this day and time, many of us have cell phones, so your anxiety will increase somewhat, if not very high. So, another specific thing that I came across in doing this research is social media multitasking. Now, this doesn't have to do directly with social media use like Facebook or Twitter, but it has to do more with technology. But what I found in doing this research is you can't really talk about social media without bringing in technology. They're hand in hand. Without technology, we wouldn't have social media. We use our cell phones and our computers to get on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those. And so research suggests that media multitasking may be uniquely associated with deficits in basic cognitive processes, such as the ability to successfully filter out irrelevant information and ignore distractions. So this is very important because there are many times where now we're seeing more and more signs that, you have to put your cell phones away, you have to, turn your cell phones off, you have to do this. And this is building anxiety in us when we have to do this because we're so used to doing, 50 things at once with with this technology. The increase in technology usage is directly connected to cognitive processing and the ability to filter out unnecessary information. So when in class, when you have to focus on maybe reading a book or doing one specific task, then you can't do that because you're so used to, watching a 15-second video, going to the next 15-second video, and the themes of what we see on social media are, from this extreme to that extreme. There may have been a hurricane here, which is really, kind of sad and negative, when over here someone just had a beautiful baby girl, and over here, someone just graduated, or over here there's police brutality. And so there's all of these different things that we're constantly taking in, and when it's time to focus on one specific task, then it's harder for us to filter out this information. So this is really important to our development, and as people continue to use their wireless mobile devices regularly, they find it more difficult to be without them. So, conducting the research process, I want to talk briefly about emotional contagion. Which is the emotional state that can be transferred to others via emotional contagion, leading people to experience the same emotions without their awareness. Now, this is directly connected to the psychological effects of social media. We're kind of moving on from technology back into the social media realm. This specific topic is talking about Facebook posts. And in Facebook posts, the linguistic inquiry classified status posts as positive and negative. And in that, they're able to measure if the post that you see reflects the kind of post that you post in the future. Let me break that down a little bit more. So if I see a post of someone who is just going through a hard time, they're constantly, I can't do this, my life is so depressing, those kind of words, according to how they did the study, will be put in a negative post. And so while researching this study, they had a sample size of 689,000 people, which I think is, very valid in this research because they use so many people. If I see that post and then they see a correlation between the post that I've seen, and now I'm posting things like, oh, my life is terrible, and I'm posting things that are equivalent to what I've seen, then that's how we know that emotional contagion exists, because I'm doing monkey see, monkey do, pretty much. Those who post negative posts saw negative posts, and those who post positive posts in return saw positive posts. And another example of this would be, like many times we'll see on Sundays, everyone is kind of posting about church or Jesus or religious posts, because that's what Sunday is for. It's a religious day. So you see that, you post that, and now we're all kind of in the same boat of our topic. So in conclusion, there is a correlation between the Facebook statuses that you see and the Facebook statuses that you post. Now, psychologically, this can work both ways. If I see negative Facebook posts or depressing Facebook posts, then that can cause me to be depressed throughout my everyday life. However, if I see positive posts and uplifting posts, then that can also help me in my well-being. But one of the key things to remember, and that I found in my research, are that negative posts get more views. So usually on the timeline, there is more negative than positive, because that's what keeps the users using Facebook. If we saw positive posts every day, then they wouldn't have nearly as many users as they have. The reason why it is so successful, according to research, is because a lot of the information is negative, and that's why social media can lead to depression, because that's kind of that's what we're attracted to. Misery loves company. So, obstacles through this research. Early on, I found very, very biased scholarly sources. I did a research article that spoke really highly about Facebook, and when I got to the end and when I really dug into the source of where this information came from, it was like the director of Facebook who had done the research. And so I found that they're really taking over the internet. So although I was able to find things that there's really no telling what information is true and what information is not, because of who's putting it out there. And when I saw the information, I still used, because it was a good research article, but I had to just be conscious that I don't know if what he's saying is 100% true, because he worked for the company. Another obstacle was the variety in social media research. Facebook is the top social media in the world right now. It was said that there are over 1 billion people on Facebook in just one day. And so that's pretty huge. It is the largest, and so because of that, I wanted my research to be on social media as a whole, but because Facebook is the most popular, then a lot of the research dealing with social media dealt directly with Facebook. So I couldn't get information about Twitter, and I couldn't get information about Snapchat because they're not as popular. So not all social media use can lead to these psychological effects, because I wasn't able to find information on those social medias as much as I did Facebook. So further research, positive psychology effects of social media. This is really important because this correlates with my third point in further research. Do negative psychological effects outweigh the positive? Because if they do, then this is something important for us to know. But if the negative research or if the negative psychological effects do not outweigh the positive, then there's really no need for us to really dig into it, because the positive has a greater effect on us. So it really, that's important to know if this is relevant to everyone. And also, like I spoke about before, the variety of other popular sites. We would need to know more about Twitter, more about the other social media sites, in order to really get a well-rounded idea of what these sites can really do to us psychologically. In conclusion, there are multiple features in social media that lead to depression and anxiety in young adults. However, more research must be done to adequately measure well-being to social media use. And those are my websites. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I will now open the floor for questions or comments or concerns. Yes.
This is not directly on social media, but it always amazes me when I look at websites where people post comments, how sort of negative and sort of extreme comments are. Did you find anything about that in your research? That something about the internet brings the worst out in us, or something like that?
Well, yes. I found slight research on that. It really mainly went back to saying how they really push for the negative to be out front. So if there are positive comments, then you wouldn't really see them on your news feeds unless you're digging for them. The negative comments are kind of put out front. As soon as you log in, they're there and you see them, while the positive comments are kind of behind. You have to click a few buttons to see, oh, well, you know, she said something nice here, or he said something nice here. So it really pretty much goes into what they know we want to see versus what's right. And a lot of times in social media, they put what we know we want to see, which a lot of times is the negative. Yes.
In conducting your research, did you find anything that you found to be true for others to be true for yourself, as far as like the effects it's had on you?
Yes. Yes, I have. Which is why I wanted to go through with this, because I wanted to see if there was any correlation between my social media use and the research that I found, and I really did. There are many times when, just kind of like I said in the research, when things are negative or bad that are happening, and by the time I get off and I've read all the comments, I feel kind of like, man, like, poor children in Africa, like, I can't, like, I want to do something about it, and it really, I don't know how deep it goes, but it does affect me, and I do, sometimes get lost in the articles that, are just, you don't really know. We weren't able to know what's happening all around the world until social media, so there may have been a huge disaster here, but I couldn't see the pictures of the babies. I couldn't see the pictures, of the floating bodies in the water. You aren't able to grasp that. So now with social media, it really gives you a direct connection to what's happening around the world. And sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. So yes, I did see a big correlation between my social media use and what I explained. And another thing that I saw was that, another thing that I've learned and that I really want to put into effect is that on the weekends, usually there are more positive posts. And so now I want to work on, throughout the week, kind of minimizing my time on social media until the weekend comes, so that it doesn't affect me as much, so that I don't really see as much. And I don't know if it'll work, but I'll try it. I've been trying it out so far. The weekends are pretty happy. Everyone's happy it's Friday. No one's happy it's Monday. That's kind of how it goes. Any more questions?
Well, thank you, Aisha.
Thank
Sarah, I don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, excellent.
Thank you.